Hello and welcome to Across Africa, our weekly look at stories from across the continent. Coming up in the show, the UN's warned that the war in South Sudan's reached catastrophic proportions and has created Africa's worst refugee crisis. Also in South Africa, in the ANC party, there are deepening concerns amongst the faithful that their leaders strayed far from party roots. And over the last decade, Ivory Coast became the world's #1 producer of cashews. Having cracked the tough market, farmers are now demanding a fairer price for their product. But first, there are warnings that violence in South Sudan has sparked Africa's largest refugee crisis. Most of the displaced are fleeing to neighbouring Uganda, but there are also thousands who are staying in their homeland after having been forced from their communities.
They fled in a hurry and only took a few belongings with them. These South Sudanese refugees left their country to escape clashes between government and rebel forces. They've just arrived in neighbouring Uganda.
Look at me. I'm wearing torn, dirty clothes. We sleep in the bush. This is a terrible situation.
The UN says that the situation in South Sudan has now sparked Africa's biggest refugee crisis. Nearly half of the country's 1.5 million refugees are in Uganda. Currently 2,000 people, mostly women and children, are arriving in Uganda every day.
I had just planted some crops and I was waiting to harvest. I lost everything because of the war. They're killing people. I was scared for my life.
Many people have fled their homes but stayed in South Sudan. The UN special representative in the country recently visited a camp in Bentu for these internally displaced people.
We've got operations and fighting both in the south and unfortunately up in the Upper Nile state as well. We need a peace agreement. We need peace. That is the most fundamental element that's missing in South Sudan.
The UN said this was an unprecedented crisis and it needed €1.5 billion. The conflict initially pitted President Salva Kiir and the National Army against the rebels of his former Vice President Riek Machar. Later the fighting increased when different armed groups joined both sides, forcing so many South Sudanese to flee their homes.
Instability in Libya has just deepened since the end of the 2011 revolution. As part of that, in 2015, Islamic State militants took over the city of Sirte. They were eventually driven out, allowing locals to tentatively start returning to their battle-scarred homes.
Last year, for 7 months, Libyan armed groups loyal to the unity government fought a fierce battle to recapture the town of Sirte from the Islamic State group. They defeated them in December. 2 months later, they're accused of cars waiting to re-enter the town. Residents initially fled in 2015. When the jihadists took control, there's still a heavy military presence. Families have to register before they can go and inspect their houses.
Thanks to God, today we just returned home and found that the damage was minimal. Some broken glass and that's it. Everything's fine. I wasn't expecting the situation to be like this.
More than 1,500 families have returned to Sirte since the beginning of the month.
Thanks to God, our house is still here and we are in good health, and so are our children.
Was your house damaged during the conflict?
The houses here are not damaged, but I don't know about the houses in the other residential areas.
Islamic State militants have left Sirte, but they are still present in Libya. They've moved to desert valleys and inland hills southeast of Tripoli as they try to exploit Libya's political divisions.
An emergency was declared in the Nigerian city of Port Harcourt. People living there have been protesting over environmental pollution that's left rooftops, cars and even faces lined in black soot. Locals blame the effect on a Chinese-run asphalt factory they say is the cause of the problem.
In Port Harcourt, black soot is everywhere. These protesters say their health is under threat.
A lot of us are suffering from our nostrils, from the water we drink, from the water we bath. So everything, you wake up in the morning to black particles surrounding us and making us unhealthy.
Demonstrators blame this Chinese-run asphalt factory. They complain about heavy smog coming from its furnace. In response to the protest, the local government shut down the plant, whose asphalt products are used in road construction.
These matters, we can go and show them 2 or 3 plants We may bomb 2 or 3 sites, but these matters eventually strike at the very fabric of our federal system. We must make sure we control the situation.
The soot is not only in the streets but also inside people's houses.
Look at soot now.
Scientists explain that particle pollution like soot can be linked to heart diseases and strokes.
You look around my apartment, my window, the veranda, the window net, my kitchen, the sink, even to the bathroom. If I try to take a bath, having my bath, the color of the water, the stains on the sink is always black.
Activists say environmental rules are often not implemented in Nigeria because of weak state resources and widespread corruption.
To South Africa now, where in the ruling ANC party, the party of Nelson Mandela and the fight against apartheid, there are deepening concerns amongst members that their representatives have strayed far from their roots. After Parliament recently once again descended into chaos, frustrations are worse than ever.
They pray for the African National Congress, for its unity and for its president. The leaders of the ANC Women's League are worried.
Not stand at the periphery when the ANC is being destroyed. The time has come for us as women. Ukuthi sithi no.
They say no to recurring violence in Parliament. Opposition members are regularly thrown out of the chamber for trying to prevent President Jacob Zuma from speaking. Some ANC MPs unofficially say that to save the party, Zuma should resign before the end of his mandate in 2019. But in public, they make a point of staying united. Little seems to shake Zuma after last week's parliamentary scuffle. It was quickly business as usual for the leader.
Good state of mind. Good state of mind.
Thank you.
But he knows he's on the way out. His Vice President Cyril Ramaphosa has already thrown his hat in the ring to lead the ANC. Also in the running is Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, the former African Union president, who happens to be Zuma's ex-wife. Divisions between ANC factions are deepening, and for analysts, the way forward is far from clear.
The ANC has always been a broad ideological church, in fact. It's always had a left-of-centre socialist-leaning tradition. It's always had a right-of-centre nationalistic or African nationalistic tradition. And all the great ANC leaders have found a way of holding these two traditions or tendencies together and to bring them to the centre.
I think that the potential for another split in the ANC is a possibility that cannot be discounted. I think it will largely be an outcome of the result of the National Conference at the end of this year.
It's all up for grabs. Whoever ANC delegates choose as party leader at the December Congress will have to paper over the party cracks in time to run for tough elections in 2019.
In just 10 years, Ivory Coast has become the world's #1 producer of cashews. Producers say that they're not seeing the fruits of their labour, though, and are demanding a fairer price for their product. Our correspondent sent us this report from Mamagula in the centre of the country.
Hour after hour, backs hunched with the effort, farmers sift the soil. They are sorting through the leaves, looking for cashews. This small nut has revived some rural livelihoods in the region. Once, cocoa was king here, but climate change has dried up opportunities for many. And even with cashews, some are still struggling.
How many times do you have to bend down? How long do you have to suffer to get just 1 kilo of nuts that isn't worth 500 CFA francs? You can see how tough it is. The price isn't good. We have children. We need to send them to school. We have to eat. Really, we're desperate.
Last year, Ivorian cashew nuts sold for half the price of nuts from neighbouring Ghana. It's thought to be an inferior quality product. Some groups, though, traders and processors, for example, are netting bigger profits with the cheaper Ivorian nuts.
There are a small number of people who are making money to the detriment of the growers. And this year, we're not letting them get away with it. If the fixed price is next to nothing, we will stop production all over Ivory Coast.
After coffee and cocoa, the cashew is heralded as Ivory Coast's new agricultural hope. But with many people in rural areas struggling to make a living, they're heading into the cities. According to the World Bank, at current rates, Ivory Coast will lose half its rural population within the next 10 years.
Gin distillers in South Africa are in good spirits over the burgeoning international success of their product. Craft distilleries around Cape Town are using local flowers and herbs to wet the whistle of a usually beer-loving nation.
There are 144 craft gins to choose from at Mother's Ruin. But the real attraction at this specialty gin bar in Cape Town are the 20 made here in South Africa with local plants. Small specialty distilleries have recently popped up in the city and the surrounding wine farms as gin gains popularity.
As the way it's booming, it's a curiosity, so people are curious, people want to see what's going on, and it's word of mouth. So everybody speaks about gin, people want to see it, people want to taste it, experience it, see what the possibilities is with it.
Traditionally, the spirit is distilled with juniper berries, which give it its distinctive flavour. But the biodiversity hotspot of the Cape region allows for experimentation with some more exotic flora. Rooibos, buku, honeybush, rose geranium. Local gin makers are spoiled for choice.
We also use things like kapokbos, which is a wild Cape snowbush, a wild rosemary. It's sweet yet earthy at the same time, which is something I haven't discovered in another plant.
Lucy and her partner were lawyers before they jumped on the global gin bandwagon 2 years ago and opened Hope on Hopkins, the city's first licensed gin distillery.
Here it was always associated with colonial days and sundowners, which is not perhaps the best image. And so it's very exciting to be reinventing that image completely.
Though gin only accounts for 0.1% of alcohol consumed by South Africans, local distillers are wary of oversaturating the craft gin market. And they are hoping their unique Cape gins will attract discerning drinkers from around the world.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for this week. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.